Okay folks, so new as I am to YouTube vlogging and video making of this kind, I'll try and do this one in landscape and be a bit easier to watch hopefully. So yeah, just back to our cheap Chinese fittings video from yesterday, and looking at, I promised you a comparison to some other fittings. I'm about to make the return line for my catch can that I indicated yesterday, so one last look at these before I start putting them to use. Here again are our cheap Chinese fittings which we went through yesterday. The interesting ones of course being these straight fittings, which in fact the hose ends all have this same finish. It's almost cast looking finish. Again, I'm no expert on how AND fittings are made, but I've never seen fittings that have this matte sort of finish that doesn't look machined. And of course they've got the interesting offset bore, which I think is a bit of a defect, but anyways, be that as it may. Yes, but comparing those to some other fittings. One fitting that I hadn't showed you in our video the other day was this weld-on bung, which I also bought. This is a Chinese bung, and I think again it was about half the price of what you'd ordinarily pay for an Aeroflow or a Speedflow bung. Looks alright, except for the fact that there are some sort of manufacturing or casting or machining irregularities in the bore, but very minor, nothing too concerning. It will be interesting to see how it welds. The outer finish seems okay, and nothing to be too concerned about. Interestingly, this bung came from the same supplier as the odd hose ends, the Australian supplier I talked about before. Now over to some fittings of higher quality, starting with Summit fittings, which certainly many of our American subscribers will be familiar with. Summit racing branded fittings are very popular in the US. They're inexpensive. Summit Racing sell these fittings, and I believe they're made in China, but they're not bad. We've used them fairly regularly with good success. Many of you know that I have family in the States, so getting these is a little easier for me than it may be for some, although some ship fairly inexpensively. Some brand fittings are of noticeably better quality than the Chinese ones we saw before, and certainly I'm pretty impressed with them. We've never had any issues with them using them, and pretty happy with them in terms of their quality. Yeah, so that's these ones are actually AND12 for the dry sump, and these are AND6 that we plan to use for our fuel system. On to a Russell branded fitting now. You can see the little R logo on it there when I get the light right. These fittings are noticeably better than the Summit ones, and certainly way better than the Chinese ones, as you would expect. This is a different style of fitting. I don't believe it's cutter style fitting. The Russell fittings, these ones I think are a compression style fitting. And I haven't used many of these, but they come highly recommended, at least on the Summit website, and are a significant step up in visual quality, and the look and feel of the fitting from both the Summit branded fittings, but in particular from the Chinese ones. Finally, we have an Earls branded fitting. This is an Earls 120 AN12, which I plan to use in our dry sump scavenge system on our IPRA 323 build. All these fittings, the good quality ones that I'm showing you now, are earmarked for the IPRA 323 build, fuel system and oil system, and this fitting is just beautiful. Look, you get what you pay for, obviously, with these things, and this Earls fitting, beautifully machined, lovely finish, to the point where they've even gone to the effort of copper easing the thread on the cutter wheel, and it is a gorgeous fitting. Now again, this fitting is probably 3 to 4 times the price of one of the Chinese ones, but it is a beautiful fitting, and again, if you want quality, I don't think many people would argue that Earls produce some of the best quality stuff. Finally, as a point of comparison, this is an old turbo return. I think this is a push lock fitting that I inherited from somebody when I bought a turbocharger. This is an Aeroquip fitting, and so Aeroquip and Aeroflow, I believe, are sort of the same sort of thing. Somebody might correct me if I'm wrong. The fitting has been used a bit. This fitting isn't great, and to be honest with you, the machining on the nut is all right, but it kind of looks, like an inexpensive fitting, and I'm sure it works, and it's probably on par with maybe the Summit branded stuff that we looked at before. But yeah, I'm not sure whether it's up to the standard of the Earls or the Russell stuff. So this is the line we're going to tee into. This is currently a hard alloy line, a return line from the turbocharger, Garrett Turbo, into the sump of my CA18 race engine. I'm going to remove that line and replace it with a tee off the bung at the bottom in the sump, and I'm going to run one part of that tee up obviously to the turbo return and the other one through the one-way flapper valve up to the catch can. By way of further comparison, I have here some Aeroflow fittings and also a Summit check valve, which I've also found in my vast collection of stuff here that's been earmarked for future builds and various projects that I haven't gotten to yet. You'll see that the Aeroflow fittings, these are actually PTFE hose ends, AN6, which I think I bought for a fuel return that I was building with PTFE pipe at some point. They are Aeroflow fittings. Again, I believe they're made in China, but they're quite nicely done. There's nothing wrong with these fittings at all. They are branded Aeroflow, as you can see, and so nicely put together. They do have the little PTFE specific crush valve inside to hold the tube in, and there's nothing wrong with those at all. But again, you're probably looking at paying somewhere between twice and 3 times as much for these as you would for the similar Chinese branded hose ends. I also have here whilst on the subject of Aeroflow stuff, I have here an AN10 Aeroflow coupler, a 90-degree female to male coupler with a swivel on it. This is also quite a nice piece. I think I bought this some time ago and didn't end up using it for something, so it's in my collection of stuff that's sitting around. But again, a nice piece. Aeroflow, in spite of the hating that they sometimes get from some people, I don't mind their stuff, and it's not bad for the money. Here though, I do have a Summit branded check valve, which is interesting to compare to my AN8 Chinese flapper valve. Now this, I believe, is a ball and spring valve. You can sort of see inside the spring there and the ball, which is evident there. I believe you can see it. And again, what I have noticed about this valve is, whilst it's a lovely looking piece, it's actually quite restrictive in its flow. I have trouble blowing through this as certainly anything like as easily as I did the Chinese valve. Now, I'm not sure if that's a function of the design, but certainly I'd be a bit concerned, for example, putting this in line on the pressure side of an oil system. For example, if you were running an oil cooler or something and you wanted to prevent drain back. I know that is an occasional use for these sorts of things. That this might not allow enough flow and might even result in a loss of oil pressure or something. I'm a little bit concerned about it doing its job, or in a fuel system maybe restricting flow. This again is an AN10, so it's not the sort of thing you would use in a fuel system, but it's interesting to note that there's no way this would flow anything like as freely as, ironically, as the AN8 Chinese check valve. So yeah, an interesting comparison there. Now, ironically, since going through the process of showing you all those various fittings, it's become clear after looking at the application that I won't be able to use a couple of the Chinese hose ends that I've earmarked for that project, simply because space won't allow me to get them in there. Those of you who are familiar with doing projects with AN hose ends have probably come across this issue before. Sometimes you find you don't have the right ends for the job. In this case, I do have the right ends for the job, but I don't have enough hose in between them to give me enough comfort in terms of the flex and fitment that they'll fit. So what I'm going to do instead is to use the push lock fitting that I had with the hose that I showed you in one of the earlier videos, and or I've actually ordered a Chinese push lock fitting, straight push lock fitting to slot it onto the turbo. The shorter push lock fittings should give me enough hose in between to get me where I need to be in terms of clearance and flexibility.
So the conclusion to this series will probably take a little longer. I'm not going to have that fitting in time for my racing engagements this weekend, so I've just put the original setup back in the car, and we'll race it as I have in the past, just losing all the oil in the catch can. And yeah, I won't be able to test these Chinese fittings straight away. In any event, I'll post this video now simply because I think it's interesting to see how the different fittings compare from an observation perspective. I'll also add this. I did have a good mate of mine who is a racing buddy mentioned to me that he is a regular user of Chinese hose ends and fittings, and that he has fairly good success with them. He mentioned a failure rate of 1 in 20, which sounds pretty good, I guess, and overall, for the price savings, might suggest that there's definitely economies in it, provided that 1 in 20 that fails is not the one that results in you losing an engine or transmission or catching on fire or something like that. So thanks, Mick. And he indicates that one of the ways he tests them when before he puts them in the car is to test them with 100 psi of compressed air, and I'm imagining that the failures he's experienced were under testing and not in race conditions. He's also mentioned to me very kindly that the finish irregularities that I observed in my earlier video probably aren't something to be too concerned about. Hopefully that becomes apparent in my testing, although I doubt it will be as rigorous as the sort of testing he's talked about performing for himself. So that's an interesting sidebar. In any event, I will be back with you at some point in the future, hopefully, probably after the September racing round, provided everything goes well this weekend. Hopefully at that point I'll be able to test the new setup. In the meantime, I'll post this video and catch you all later.